what I asked you initially when you were booking the call, what comes to mind when you think about your body weight? And so there were various different sort of segments to this. The first, I think, which probably everyone has been in at some kind of point, is like the negative side of stuff. Like, damn, you're fat as fuck. Mixed feelings of being okay, frustrated, anxiety, stress, being obsessed over the weight, and then also like various other feelings of like disappointment or stuff that creeps into the negative self-talk place. Marvin, do you think you could actually send Tasneem Ghanem the link to the call, please?
Gotcha.
I think she's just WhatsApping me. And then some of you have kind of like moved on in that respect and are still being kind of weighed down by the feeling of your weight. And so there's one frame I want to give you here. And this comes off of someone's comment, which was, to me, it's very difficult to lose weight. I started 4 months ago in the program, and the weight I lost is okay. I was hoping for a bigger number. The good thing is, which we'll come onto this later, are those, intangible things that are stronger, being more healthy and positive. And so, the fact that this lady has, secured and really ramped up this lifestyle, feeling a lot better about herself, being consistent with the gym, all of these sorts of things, and seeing change is amazing. But I think one of the things that I want to highlight to you is, a bit of an analogy when it comes to weight loss, right? So think of, gaining weight over the years as a ship gradually being blown off of course, right? And so that takes time. And in order to get back on course, it also takes time as well. And that is why a lot of things, a lot of like routes to fat loss and weight loss, which are, quick solutions, lose 10 kilos in 8 weeks or whatever it might be, are things that are ultimately unsustainable with time. Whereas what all of you are focusing on really is about building the momentum, building the habits, building the foundation, which ultimately is going to get you back on track. And so, for example, if you have gained 20 kilos over, 10 years or 5 years or whatever it might be, it's not going to take a sort of a 4 week, 8 week plan to turn that around, right? That is going to take time. And ultimately, like you want to build the habits and the behaviors and get yourself to a place that gradually pulls you back on track. And so consistency and time are big things that we need to think of when it comes to weight and body composition as well. Also, some people are getting to the point where they are, starting to see other measures as elements of success, right? How the weight is actually split, relying on tape measurements or pictures to see the visual difference in what they're having. And so the scale, I know there's like a hate relationship with the scale most of the time, but I think the reason why I wanted to include this is if you are in that place, then you will with time, be able to change that relationship. And that is the purpose of this call today. Lastly, I wanted to give someone a shout out here, Aziz, over in Riyadh. And, for him, this was what he shared. When he thinks of his body weight, there is a mix of emotions, right? At times he feels motivated and proud. And there's also times of frustration and criticism. And I'm sure he won't mind me saying this. When we had our first call, he is one of these healthcare professionals that I talk about. And he would get home after a long shift, order 4 cheeseburgers, eat them in his bed, and that would be his routine. And so fast forward, what, like 9 months? He is smashing Arabian Warrior. He's doing the Riyadh Marathon. We did the Alola Arabian Warrior together, and now he's in London at the moment, and he's going to the gym. And also, on top of that, he has lost a ton of weight. So, again, the reason for sharing this is like it may feel hopeless at times. It may feel extremely challenging to get to that point. But step by step, you absolutely get there. It's just the time it takes to readdress various different negative thought patterns that you may have in relation to this. So, anyway, what we are covering today is all around your body weight, what it's made up of, why the scale might not be moving, even though you may be doing everything right, common myths or beliefs that you may have picked up over the years, and other useful progress metrics that we can track with a typo. We also have practical tips about how to ensure you are losing the right kind of weight. Weight, we don't want to just lose weight exclusively, right? We want to lose body fat. We want to maintain muscle mass. That is going to give us the body shape that we want. And so please feel free to ask questions as we go through. We may periodically stop, or Marvin may reply, or myself may reply in the chat, and we will have a bit of a Q&A at the end as well. So please feel free to take notes or ping questions in the chat box. But for now, over to Marvin here.
So what makes up your body weight? I think oftentimes we think body weight is just fat, and especially when you are trying to lose body fat, all you ever think about when you think about weight is body fat. But we forget that, your total body weight comprises of fat mass and then lean body mass, which is essentially everything else that is not fat. So if we break it down even further, when we look at fat mass, we have visceral fat, which is basically the fat around your organs. And then we have subcutaneous fat, which is the fat just below the skin. If we break down the lean body mass, so the fat-free mass, the mass that doesn't have fat, that is water. We've got muscles. We have our vital organs, your heart, your kidney, your intestines. And then we also have food, which comprises a very, very small portion of your total body weight. And especially, as we'll see as we go on through the rest of the call, you'll notice that this can also, be one of the things that makes your body weight fluctuate on a daily basis. And we've got over here, yes, so we've got over here the in-body, which is what we use typically to sort of assess people when they first come and start working with us. And you'll notice that there's a whole host of things on here. It talks about total body water, protein, minerals, body fat mass, weight. We actually don't really want to look at all of that. To simplify it even further, we just want to look at body fat and then lean body mass, which is fat-free mass. And I've already sort of explained that in the previous slide. Now, when people generally, again, think about weight, they think it's fat, but it doesn't equal fat. There's various other things that we need to consider. Pete, do you want to shift over to the next slide? So how many times have you noticed, like you wake up in the morning and everything was kind of trending downwards nicely, and then your weight is going up. And so you start wondering what's happening. Well, maybe you started strength training and the body weight's going up. Maybe you had an intense training session previously, the weight's gone up. Maybe you had a higher sodium meal, a meal that has a little bit more salt than usual or more carbohydrates than usual, and the weight has gone up. Maybe you haven't gone to the bathroom in a couple of days. So, the weight is also not going up, or it's going up or not moving. You're premenstrual, and this is something that we actually find often with our female clients where, people sometimes aren't even aware that this is what happens. And now when we're tracking our weight on a daily basis, they then see that, when I'm, premenstrual, then my weight kind of starts to go up. And so they get bogged down, they get upset, they get frustrated because they think they're doing everything, and yet the weight's is not moving. But then we see that after a few days, a couple of weeks, it actually starts to trend downwards again. If you drink less water, or if you sweat more than usual, we also see that your weight might actually come down. So let's talk about why the scale moves or doesn't move. Water retention is obviously a big topic. Again, we spoke about that with the menstrual cycle. Carbohydrate stores. So in your body, when you consume carbohydrates, they actually then get stored either in the muscles or in the liver. So when these are in the body, getting ready to get used, they also cause a little bit of weight gain. So now I'm sure you've heard carbohydrates are bad, don't eat carbs at night. Carbs are what make you make you gain weight. They don't make you gain weight. We spoke about a calorie deficit a couple of weeks ago, and we now know that it's not carbohydrates, it's a calorie deficit that helps us lose weight. The gut contents of food in your stomach also might be stopping the scale from moving. Muscle or fat changes. How many times have you done an in-body and then seen that your body fat percentage has actually gone down, and yet you step on the scale every morning and you're seeing that it's barely moving? So when you lose body fat, but then actually gain muscle, the weight stays exactly the same. And so this is another reason why the scale might not move. We've already touched on the menstrual cycle. Lack of sleep also impacts the scale not moving. This can happen for various reasons. One of them just being your hormones. So, your cortisol goes up, therefore you crave more food, therefore you don't make the best decisions, therefore the scale, moves or doesn't move. And then stress. When our body is stressed, we just tend to hold a lot more water because your body is, for lack of a better term, trying to survive, wondering what's happening. And so it's trying to preserve as much energy as possible. If we are now, where are we? Talking about the fluctuations. So this is actually, we've pulled this up because this is a great example of why we do the daily averages and why daily fluctuations happen or how they happen. So this person over here started July 31st to August 6th, and they were at 100 kilos, right? And then we've opened this up to see what the following week looked like. So you can see that it's 100, 100, 100. They drop down to 99 a little bit, and then they hang there for a couple of days. By the end of this week, they're still at 100 kilos. Shift over to the other side. So now the following week, now we're heading into the 99s. And then at the end of the week, they're at 99. And so you can see that they've barely moved. It's actually 99.9. It's 100 grams that they've lost in a week. And so you wonder, this person must have been so frustrated, wondering what's happening. I'm doing everything right. But then if you zoom out and see what's actually happening on a much larger scale over weeks and weeks, we actually see that they are making some insane progress. To firstly touch on, zooming out even further, currently sitting at 74, but started at 100. But how we got there was on a weekly basis. We were now starting to see, some some changes. So that last 99.9 we saw earlier, now we see 99.4 the following week, 98.9 the following week. And then it kind of goes up again, 99. And then it seems like all of a sudden, they've now gone to 96.5, and I actually remember this very vividly, Pete. Do you remember this when she traveled?
Yes.
So she traveled, just to give you guys a little bit of insight of what happened here. So she traveled, she's in the medical field, and obviously very highly stressed, barely sleeping, still working out, still trying her very best to get, quality nutrients, protein, fruits and vegetables, her steps. Obviously she gets her steps. She's in the medical field, constantly walking. But it was almost like something clicked when she went away. And then she came back, lo and behold, 96.5. And just continued to trend downwards from there on out. So this was actually a really interesting one for us as well, because it was like, we knew that it was going to happen. It was a matter of time. And lo and behold, 96.5 came along.
And it's one of those things where, it feels like you're doing everything, perhaps week to week, you're hitting your targets, you're doing well, but you're not seeing the change. And for some reason, the body works in weird and wonderful and often frustrating ways. And then there may be something like a week where everything just changes. Maybe you're less stressed, or, it's very difficult at times to give a rationale for it. But you reach that point where, the floodgates open and we see like a big drop. So I guess the point here is there will be times where you feel like you've plateaued, or you're failing, or you're doing everything in your power, but you're not just getting there. And so there's an element of just being patient and like doing the thing, which ultimately is going to get you to where you want to be. And that is why we have these targets, to make sure that we are seeing, or you're doing what you need to do. And then I'm going to touch on that in a moment, in a bit more detail. But to go into like the beliefs and myths we may have sort of, heard in the past or before, and please in the chat, just pipe up if you feel like this is you at times. So, belief number one, I gained 200 grams from yesterday. I'm getting fatter. Like, we have to change everything. And so this could be water, it could be inflammation, it could be carbohydrate stores, it could be you had a bigger meal in the evening. And so again, as Marvin's saying, weight doesn't necessarily equal fat. And so what we try and do, and you would have seen it in the initial answers that we had on the first few slides, right, is we try and avoid the emotional attachment to the weight. Because ultimately what we understand, or if we have rationale behind why things are as they are, then that pulls away that emotional side of things. So, they say knowledge is power. And so that is especially true when it comes to, looking and understanding weight. Because, like, here's a point, and, it's quite a funny one at that, is like, it is crazy to think that, if you went up 200 grams on the scale one morning, your day, your mood could be ruined, and you just may need to go to the toilet. Like, that may be the thing, or you haven't been to the toilet for a day or two. And so, before, like, becoming frustrated with, the situation, or maybe you've had an off weigh-in, there is always a reason for that. And again, this is why we look at the weekly average, so that even if there is an anomalous reading, whether high, whether low, we get that element of control and accuracy. Belief number two. So I think, Marvin, you've heard this a few times here as well. People, and again, pipe up in the chat if you have, you may have been told by someone or even convinced yourself that you need to be a particular weight. So, there may be no rationale behind the number. It may have been your mum or your dad or whoever it is saying, you need to be this, you need to be this. And that has stuck in your head for years. And that is what you're kind of pulling to over time. And so, again, like the number that this is, right? Say, I don't know, it's 55 kilos. If it is that, then 55 kilos can look many different ways, right? You could be 50% body fat with 55 kilos, or you could be 20% body fat with 55 kilos. So it is the composition of the weight that is the important thing. And so that is why obviously things like the Embody, progress pictures, measurements, all of that kind of stuff are really useful and important when it comes to this. And also, you probably heard about the BMI, right? And this is essentially a metric where it classes people on their weight, on their height, at a certain classification. So everything from underweight through to basically morbidly obese. And this number, or this sort of measure, the body mass index, is basically very flawed in a way, because it looks at weight as a total. It doesn't look at things like body fat or muscle mass, and sort of, it doesn't account for sex, ethnicity, genetics, all this kind of stuff. And so if you are being, if you are thinking, okay, I need this body weight based on the BMI, then this can lead you into quite a troublesome way, because again, it doesn't take into things like muscle mass. So I'm sure there's been times, Marvin, yourself included, when you've probably been a bit more muscular, same with me, where you would be clinically obese, right? So it's it's flawed in that respect. So it's important to understand where the target or the number in your head is coming from, because there's many different factors that influence that. And ultimately it's, a sign of health isn't necessarily tied to the number, which we're obviously going to look at in a moment.
I actually played around, and I am qualified as obese at the moment, which I doubt that I'm obese.
Okay, fine. So, belief three, I should just eat less and move more. And so, a lot of the time with this advice or this belief is it doesn't give you any kind of tracking or progressive plan, right? You are essentially going in blind. And so what people tend to do is they go from, eating whatever they're eating to like eating, I don't know, half a meal a day. And yes, they may see the weight come off, but that weight, as we know, isn't necessarily just fat. It's going to be muscle mass. It's going to be body fat. Yes, also things like your glycogen, your carbohydrate stores, the water held in your body attached to that. So here it's important to, manage a sustainable weight loss strategy. And that is obviously what we're looking at in terms of building from where you're at the moment, in terms of your food intake, in terms of your training, in terms of your steps, and then building that with time as you become better accustomed to doing more work. Belief number four, I can turn fat into muscle. And here, muscle mass and body fat are two totally different tissues. So the only thing that can happen with these two different tissues is you either build it, you gain it, or you lose it. But one doesn't convert to the other. And so, the reason why I think this belief is there is that if you stop training and if you overeat or maybe you move less, you may lose muscle mass and gain fat, which obviously then gives the illusion that muscle has turned to fat. So it's important to know that as you're building, as you're losing, it's not a case of swapping necessarily or transforming. It's a case of building or losing. And going back to the body weight being a measure of health, this is sort of, I guess, wildly inaccurate to some extent. The scale obviously only tells you the total mass, not the breakdown of fat, muscle, water, bone, etc. And so this has been, coming out recently in quite a lot of studies whereby lean muscle mass, so for example, muscle mass, yes. Lean muscle mass has been shown to be one of the greatest measures of health as we age. So the more muscle mass you have as you age, this significantly reduces all-cause mortality. All-cause is spelled wrong. But yes, so if you can see here, the difference between a 70-year-old man who's sedentary with the level of body fat and muscle mass versus the difference versus the sort of 70-year-old man who's active, has muscle mass, etc. So, I mean, it doesn't take a sort of a genius or a healthcare professional to maybe tell you who is going to likely have a better quality of life and therefore, most likely prolong their life to some degree. And last of all, belief number 6. So I've stopped losing weight. I'm failing. And so we've spoken about this already. And this is something that I mentioned when I share your journey with you. Where you start in this journey is going to be very different to where you are when you sort of get towards the end, when you get closer to your goal. There will be times when you plateau along the journey, and that is perfectly natural. It's expected, to be honest. And that is when you need to understand, and we share with you what it is you need to do to get to the next level, to the next stage. That may be sort of recalculating or recalibrating that calorie deficit or that calorie surplus, depending on what your goal is. And it's a sign that we need to basically change something. It has nothing to do whether you're failing or whether you are like, it's not working anymore. It's just we need to then evolve and adapt and change things, whether that is, starting to reduce some of the calories, starting to increase the calorie expenditure during the day. So all of these things can come into play. And obviously we take it case by case basis. So going back to Marvin.
Yes. So remember, when you first started, you did your first InBody and you were wondering what this was and why we did it in the first place. I think it's really important for us to, when you're trying to change something, it's important to understand where you currently are, right? So when we do the first InBody, we're assessing, we're trying to figure out where you are and then set targets for you that are going to get you to the goals, that you first set out when you had your consultation with Pete. By the way, these numbers, I think we've said this time and time again, are not just numbers that are out of thin air, right? This is why we assess where you are and then can therefore set appropriate targets based on you as an individual and based on where you want to go and also based on what's realistic. So it's really important for you to understand that these targets are there for a reason. So now you've got your targets, you know where you need to be going, you know that this is we're trying to train 4 times a week, for example. You are getting 3 to 4 daily servings of protein, 3 or 4 servings of fruits and vegetables. You're getting X amount of steps per week. What next, right? You start to think, okay, weight loss must begin now. But unfortunately, this might not be the case immediately, as we've seen with the first example that we gave of the person that was, dropping kind of gradually or looking like nothing was really happening. And then all of a sudden, it seemed like, something magical happened. So weight loss is not linear, even if you're nailing all the behaviors. It's really, really important for us to understand that. Why? It's because, all the other things we mentioned prior. So we mentioned water retention. We mentioned, food, having a little bit more where you're still digesting food. Maybe you haven't gone to the bathroom, the muscle versus fat. We mentioned that earlier as well. The menstrual cycle, the poor sleep, the stress. All these are reasons why you might not be losing weight. And yet we also know that if you continue to trust the process, the weight will eventually come off. So how do we lose the right kind of weight? Pete, you got the slide with the how to lose the right kind of weight. This is the following one.
The following one. Okay.
There we
Ooh.
go. There we go. So this is essentially what we need to understand, that there are four main pillars for you to be losing the right kind of weight, right? We've already spoken about what total weight is. We've spoken about how if we're trying to lose weight, we're trying to lose body fat versus muscle. So what do we need to do that? We need four things. We need quality nutrition so that we can be in a calorie deficit. If you're not in a calorie deficit, you're not going to lose body fat. We need to strength train so that we maintain muscle, so that we're losing the right kind of weight. We're not losing muscle, we're losing body fat. We need daily movement, because if you're not getting your steps, it means you're also probably struggling to get to maintain your calorie deficit, which means no fat loss. And then we need sleep, because poor sleep really, really can make you make maybe not the best decisions, because I think we often want to talk about the hormonal aspects of sleep and why this happens and why this happens. But I mean, honestly, when was the last time you slept 4 hours or 5 hours and ended up making some not so great decisions when it comes to nutrition, or you don't have the energy to go and work out? Therefore, you've missed out an opportunity for you to continue with your momentum of, building muscle or maintaining muscle mass. So these are really, really, really important for us to maintain these. If we want to dive deeper into each one, so if we look at quality nutrition, for example, we've spoken at length about consuming a high protein diet. Every single person has obviously a different goal and a different target that they're given, and we send the weekly accountability on a Monday for that reason. But generally, we're looking for 3 to 5 daily servings of protein, or 1 gram per pound of body weight if you are measuring your protein. We look at eating enough fruits and vegetables for various reasons. Having more fiber basically means you're going to improve digestion. It strengthens your immune system. It bulks up your meals with fewer calories, which obviously then helps you maintain that calorie deficit. Again, very different from individual to individual, but generally 3 to 4 servings on a daily basis. And then carbohydrates. We spoke earlier about how carbs aren't the enemy, and how skipping carbs isn't necessarily what you need to lose weight. You need to be in a calorie deficit. So we still want to consume carbohydrates. We just need to be cautious about our portions. We will also want to consume whole food sources of carbohydrates, so things like sweet potato, rice, quinoa, oats, versus the pastas and the breads and all those types of carbohydrates. So these we want to be aiming for 3 to 4 daily servings, again depending on your goals. If we look at the strength training portion, this is also a really key element that we spoke about. We're aiming for 2 to 4 sessions on a weekly basis, again, based on not only your goals, but also where you're at. How many times have some people said to us, Pete, I'm struggling to get my training sessions, or this is, something's happened in the family, someone's passed away, or I'm traveling, or this or that, and still they're able to get in their sessions. So it's really important for you to try and maintain a certain level of consistency when it comes to training sessions. When we talk about how you lift, because it's not enough to just go to the gym, right? You can just go to the gym and you can wing it and not actually get the benefit of being in the gym. You're there, you might as well make the most of it. So we want to be making sure that we are lifting with great technique, first of all, for safety, but also ensuring that you're really pushing the intensity. You should honestly, after every set, feel like, maybe I could have squeezed out another 1 or 2 reps. But if you could have squeezed out much more, you wasted that set. So make sure that, you start to use this advice. And then when we track progress, we think about, obviously we're talking about fat loss and weight and the scale, but I think it's also really important for us to track, progress beyond these things. So are you feeling stronger? Are you able to do daily tasks with less effort? Has your posture improved? Which is a really big one that we get from a lot of clients coming in wanting to improve their posture. If you strength train, best believe your posture is going to improve. Daily movement is key. Getting those steps in, because moving more outside the gym not only boosts fat loss, but it's also great for improving digestion. It's great for speeding up recovery. When you've got those DOMs and you're feeling like, walking a little funny, really good to still go out and get those steps. I know most people think, I'm so sore, I can't go and walk. go and walk. It will definitely help. And we spoke about this being called NEAT, so non-exercise activity thermogenesis, in the fat loss call. And this is basically, to sum it up for people that weren't there, it's basically all the calorie expenditure, all the energy expenditure that your body does outside of exercise and outside of it just living. So me talking with my hands like that, that's neat, you know? This should count towards my daily steps, but unfortunately it doesn't. Getting your steps in counts towards your needs. So this is really important because, you know, the more we are doing this, the more we're maintaining that calorie deficit. And there's obviously ways in which we do that, whether it's, you know, doing your chores, whether it's, you know, going for an extra walk at the end of your session, or maybe post, you know, meals, going for a walk. That also really helps to just maintain that that daily movement.
Yeah, I think just I wanted to chip in here to Hussein's question just around how you can hit your steps if you are living a desk job, right? If you've got a ball and chain to the desk. And I think there's a few things here, and it all start well, two aspects is it starts or we start with where you're at, right? So for example, if you are getting, 3,000 steps a day, which to be honest is about the average here in Saudi, we're not going to push you up to 10K straight away. It's never going to happen. And so going from 3K to 4K is, a good increase, right? It's a 33% increase. And so for you to start there is an improvement, is better from what you were doing prior. And then again, you hit the 4K frequently, you're doing well, you're seeing the Marvin send through the 6 out of 7s or the 7 out of 7s in the accountability each week. And then we push you a little bit more, right? Just what I was saying earlier, where you start is going to be very different to where you are, and you will have to advance things. But at that point, you'll be much more ready to embrace that challenge. And so ways you can do this, and maybe some people want to pipe up in the chat if they've had these or found these solutions before. It's about really making a concerted and conscious effort to think through your day, how can I move more? That may be simple things like walking to the printer. It may be, walking from ground floor to floor 5 or whatever it is. I remember there was again, healthcare professional would always walk like up and down 8 floors, right? Which is a hell of a lot. And it's really like, where are those times in your day? If it's, I don't know, before your workout, after your workout on the treadmill, where can you find those bits in your day to accumulate more steps? Because 500 steps here, 300 steps there, 200 steps there, that's going to add up pretty rapidly. And so again, it is being deliberate and sort of making the decision to do so, because ultimately it's what the priority is. And also, if you have a desk job, you're much more likely going to improve your productivity, and you're probably going to stay awake if you are up on your feet moving every so often. So not easy by any means. It's very simple. It's definitely not easy. That's the thing, having worked a desk job for many years in my life as well.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Pete, but as I guess someone who's in health and fitness, just in daily life, I'm always looking and seeing things that I'm like, oh man, this is what life has become. So I remember once I was at, I don't remember where it was actually, but I remember speaking to this guy, some sort of government office or something like that, and waiting for the documents for him to, print out these documents, give them back to me. And he was sat there on his desk, very those ergonomic type chairs, swung around like maybe another 10, feet or so to go grab the papers, come all the way back. And I was like, man, what a missed opportunity to get 10 steps in.
We
So
saw him, yeah. Did you
yeah, well, it just goes to show, right, that modern life is made for convenience, is made for us to no longer be moving, as much as we used to before. And so you have to, like Pete said, you have to make it a priority. You need to go out of your way. Obviously, initially it feels like you're going out of your way, but eventually you get to a point where now this has just become part of your day. Everyone else is taking the elevator, you're using the stairs.
And I think, one of the things that I don't know, it just gives me I don't know, maybe it strokes my ego or something. When you're getting off a plane
Oh,
and
yes.
you get dropped off and there's the stairs and the escalator. I swear, like, you only ever see one person walk the stairs. And it's it's decisions like that that accumulate in your day, and that is going to be what drives you from where you are, from the norm, from the average, to achieving what it is you want to achieve, to make these harder, more challenging decisions that disrupt maybe the status quo at times. So it really is like you are 100% responsible for what it is that you do in your day. Again, it may not be easy, it may not be difficult, but it really depends on what your priority is. And I think for all of you, having had the initial call with you, you all want change, you all want better for yourselves. And so with time, step by step, hubba hubba, you'll get there. So
Awesome. All right. Sleep is, I think we touched on it briefly earlier, but this is also a super, super important aspect of trying to maintain the fat loss, and supporting fat loss, supporting your hormones, and just overall health, really. I mean, poor decisions often come after midnight, right? And that's because nothing good happens after midnight. But in all fairness, poor sleep disrupts your hormones. So things like cortisol, insulin, ghrelin, leptin. So essentially, cortisol is, the hormone that's responsible for stress. So if that spikes up and goes up and spikes up at a time that's, much earlier than it should, which is typically when you wake up, if it spikes up much more, then obviously, it's not optimal. Insulin is obviously responsible for regulating your blood sugars. Ghrelin and leptin are more so for hunger and satiety. So if your sleep is not adequate, and if you're not sleeping enough hours or quality, then all these hormones get disrupted. Hence, feeling hungrier or cravings or all these other things that, we tend to get after poor sleep. Now, when it comes to being practical as to how to do this, we want to limit caffeine 6 to 8 hours before bed, food 2 to 3 hours, and then screens an hour before bed. Start winding down about 30 to 60 minutes before bed. I know Pete likes to set an alarm for him to start winding down. Most people set an alarm to wake up. He goes the other way around. Getting 7 to 9 hours every single night consistently, and then sleeping and waking up at the exact same time every day. Now, honestly, this sounds like a lot, and it might sound difficult, but again, like you do with your steps, right? Not everyone's starting at 7 or 8,000. Maybe you're starting at 1,000, and therefore, like Pete said, it's an incremental and very gradual increase. And so the same goes for your sleep. Maybe pick one thing on here and aim for that over the next week or two, and then gradually start to add one after the other.
Because I think that sleep is one of the biggest elements that holds people back from achieving what they want to achieve. If you are not sleeping well, or you don't have the quantity of sleep, then everything is interrupted, both from a kind of hormonal and internal point of view, but also from the decision making, stress, lack of willpower, lack of motivation, and it just adds on. And I think if anyone ever, not that you should, has had like a hangover, right? Nothing good happens the day after. And so whilst here in Saudi we don't necessarily have that challenge of dealing with clients here who have to manage drinking and the after effects of all of that, like sleep is, lack of sleep is, nearly as bad as having a hangover in that sense. Everything goes out the window. And then if you think about it, if you have, say, 3 bad nights sleep a week, then that can be 3 additional days, which are just running at like minimal consistency, which over the long run is a major impacting factor.
Oh, yes. Now, we spoke so much about weight. We spoke about what it means. We spoke about how to lose it. But I think it's also really important for us to not only just focus on weight and focus on other ways to track or measure progress. Because, this whole journey is, yes, you come in for fat loss. Yes, you come in to look better. But I think it's really important for us to stress the point that you start for that reason, but you stay for way more reasons, right? So it's important for us to be able to track, how clothes fit, measurements or photos, your strength and endurance. Are you improving in the gym? Are you lifting heavier? Are you stronger? Do you have more energy throughout the day? Because all these things are also measures of progress and not just the scale. mood or stress levels, or you noticing that, your stress levels are significantly less just purely because you're healthier, right? Your sleep quality as well, your digestion, because now you're eating more fiber, you're eating more fruits and vegetables, your nutrition has improved significantly, therefore your digestion is better. You no longer have cravings. I mean, the amount of times I've heard people say, oh, my cravings have gone because they're eating enough protein. I'd be rich, I think, if I could count on how many times I've heard that one. Nutrition consistency as well is such a big thing, because I think we often think, oh, if I can hit my protein goal once this week and then that's enough. No, we've got to be consistent, on a daily basis, week to week, month to month. Is, another really interesting one, and especially for the ladies, I know you really care about this. Your hair, your nails, your skin, all these things improving. These are all signs of progress, and that you're headed in the right direction, that you're becoming much healthier overall, and it's not just about the weight. Is your ability to do tasks daily tasks much, much, much easier? So whether you're doing chores in the house, whether it's, when your friends invite you for a hike, you don't feel so embarrassed anymore because you would always get out of breath. And now you're able to do that, right? You're able to do all sorts of things. I actually remember having a call with a client recently who was, is she in here? She might be in here, actually, who was volunteering at Hajj and was talking about, had this pain, and we spoke about how, and she just joined, by the way. We spoke about how over the next few months, obviously she's going to get stronger, she's going to get healthier, and a year from now, we'll be looking back and thinking, oh man, remember when you started, when you used to be in pain, when you used to have to bend over and feel your back, and now your daily tasks are much, much, much easier because you're generally much stronger. Final thoughts. So,
final thoughts.
Yeah, we've spoken a lot about weight, and as we've just outlined in the previous slide, it's just one piece of the puzzle, right? It's not just about weight loss; it's about overall health. Health and fat loss take time, and it's a lifestyle change. It's not a quick fix. So, coming back to Pete's initial analogy of the boat, right? It took you 20 odd years to put on whatever weight that you did put on. It didn't happen overnight, and therefore you shouldn't be expecting health and weight loss and fat loss to be an overnight thing, an overnight success. It also takes a bit of time. Now, I'm not saying it's going to take the same amount of time, but it for sure will take much longer than you initially anticipate. The scale doesn't define you. I think this is really, really important, because we often just, you step on the scale and, you look at the number and you think this is who I am, or this is my identity. And maybe for whatever reason, whether it's family pressure, whether it's, just society in general. And I think this plagues women much more than men. There tends to be just generally more information and more things put out towards women to say, oh, you need to be this weight, or you need to look like this, or there's just more societal pressures, if you will, right? Don't let that define you. Your actions are what define you. And we will see that based on, how you're improving and all the decisions that you're making on a daily basis. Fluctuations are normal and expected. We saw that earlier as well with, various clients where they had started at 100 kilos, 99, hung around for a little bit, went up a little bit, and then eventually we started to see that come down. So it's expected. It's normal. It's part of the journey. It's, we're not perfect. And so when nothing is perfect, right? We're always achieving or aiming and striving for progress. Progress is more than weight drops. We spoke about how it's important to look at yourself as a holistic person. It's not just about weight loss. It's not just about fat. All the other important things that you should be, paying attention to, your skin, your hair, your nails, your digestion, your sleep, all these other things are really important. And give yourself grace and compassion. You are going on a journey that requires a lot of grace and compassion, because you're changing, essentially yourself, right? You're changing a lot of ideas, ideologies, thoughts, beliefs that you've had in the past that have, been festering in your head all these years. You're being constantly fed all these things, and yet now you've made the decision to go against the grain. But going against the grain doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, right? There are going to be times where you slip up. There are going to be times where you hit speed bumps. So it's important to give yourself grace and compassion.
And I think just there on that as well, like context is an important thing, right? The amount of calls we have with people who are like, when I was, when I was in the States and I was at university, I was like this shape, I was in the best shape of my life, and now I'm like 10 years later and I'm like, what the fuck? So like context is hugely important because obviously as we progress in life, there's going to be kids that will, wife, husband, there's going to be kids if that's in the plan for you. You're going to be advancing in your job as well, which generally means you become more desk bound, as Hussein said, right? You're sort of managing more or combating sort of email tennis or whatever it might be. And so the context changes, which means you need to again just be that much more compassionate to yourself and understand what are the priorities in life. Because I imagine, for most of you, it's family, it's your job, it's your profession, but also, your health is important. So it is a case of you need to, cut out time for that in your day, in your week to make sure you get it done. But also, you're not 100% on losing weight and health and fitness because you have responsibilities and you have commitments and people depending on you, for example. So, it's important to understand the context and know what it is that you can give at this moment in time. And yeah, as Hussein said, like, I heard this great analogy on a podcast once, and it was in relation to, your health is the table, right? So if you think of the table in front of you, your health is that. On top of the table, you've got your family, you've got your job, you've got, I don't know, your cat that you saved from the streets. You've got your hobbies or whatever it is. You can take any one of those things off, family, pet, your job, and everything's going to be okay. It might suck, but everything's going to be okay. You take away the health and everything falls to shit. So there needs to be an element of prioritizing that and understanding how much you can give it. And it is, the investment, the one investment you can make in your life that is going to, pay back dividends over time. So I appreciate we've come to the end there. And I know we're humans, not machines, to finish on. Are there any questions? I know we've sort of gone through a few of the questions in the chat previously. I'm conscious of the time as well, so thank you everyone for staying and obviously chipping in as and when. And hopefully this has been super useful. As we have mentioned, this is the second one of these that we are doing, and I think the first bit of feedback we had generally from the first one we did, Fat Loss Made Simple, was that it was really nice for people to see that other people are going through the same kind of shit, right? I think when we're in such a journey, it feels like it's overwhelming. It's just us, nobody gets it. And so it's amazing to sort of bring you together and just, have you hopefully level up your knowledge and therefore level up your implementation and therefore, achieve what it is that you want to achieve. So just going through some of the questions here. Marvin, have you seen any?
Yeah, this is a great question from Samar. So Samar's asking, pills and injections that help you lose weight that we see a lot these days through social media. I know it's not a healthy way to lose weight, but how do we avoid these commercials that affect us? I love, first of all, that you said it's not a healthy way to lose weight. And for people that aren't in the know of, why it's not a healthy way, it's because you're essentially doing a crash diet course, right? Forget all the science of, how it slows down gastric emptying or, whatever the science is. Ultimately, it's no different from someone, completely cutting their calories in literally, more than half. And so what's going to happen is you're going to have nutrient deficiencies. You're going to lose a lot of muscle. I've even, read some studies where some people are actually suffering from sarcopenia, which is essentially just before osteoporosis, which means bone loss, right? And that's not a good thing. So how to avoid it? Pete, you're the social media expert here. You want to chime in?
Just, delete your account. Go to Iraq and get your account blocked. That will help. So I think sort of with the social media, like part of it is knowing, and this is kind of what I share in the journey for a lot of people. It's social media we know is a place which is clickbaity. It is going to show the extremes. It is going to get you to buy all of that kind of stuff. And so having that lens of like, okay, this is the world I'm going into. is part of it, right? You're going to see amazing transformations. You're not ever going to see really the shit. You're not going to see the people who have been, affected negatively by such pills and injections, or it hasn't worked for them, or it's worked really well, but as soon as they stop, they pile on all of the weight and more. And so it's like, again, it's knowing like what you are viewing, what you're seeing, but then also it's curating what you see. And so, what I think can be a really powerful thing for you all to do, regardless of if it is in relation to fat loss or pills or injections or whatever, but just on your social medias, like look at who you are following, look at what information you're taking in, look at like the diet your brain is on when it's looking at these sorts of things, because I guarantee there's probably a lot of like just stuff in there which has you comparing yourself to images of maybe men or women who are photoshopped as well. So you're comparing it with like super airbrush, super edited stuff. And for me, like, I've been sort of victim to that as well. And you see people with amazing physiques, and you're like, man, I need to do that and do that. But like, it can be fake. So it's like knowing what information you're taking in, and then curating that for yourself. You have the power to consume what it is that you want on social media. So that's my advice: is any accounts like that, just get rid, unfollow. If they're friends, just hide them. That's what I've done to a lot of friends. Just hide their stories so it looks like you're following, but you're not.
Or you can be like me and have no Instagram account. That
Yeah, you're
helps too.
crazy, absolutely crazy. And then Asil, like, here you tried them for a couple of years, terrible. And what have you been finding over literally what the last 2 months? You're seeing insane improvements across the board and everything because you are looking after the basics. You're looking after the fundamentals. Isra, hair loss, weak nails, depression, not great. And when like what is driving that is the number on the scale, then it just seems ludicrous to do that, right? You would much rather not lose muscle mass, lose body fat, and kind of feel shit versus feeling strong, feeling powerful, and losing weight gradually. God, it seems like lots of people have had terrible experiences with it. What else do we have here? Again, I'm just conscious of the time, so if anyone needs to go, please do. We'll finish, I think, with the question from Firas. How to balance your nutrition to be able to gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. Doing an intense calorie deficit automatically decreases energy, which makes strength workout more difficult. Yes. So there's a couple of things here. The first one is when you are in a calorie deficit, when you are trying to lose fat, it is very rare for you to build muscle at the same time. That only really happens when you are a beginner in the process. And so you've just started strength training. So what you really want to do is when you get deeper into your journey, it is to maintain the muscle mass that you have and just accept that you are not really going to be gaining muscle. You're going to be predominantly losing body fat. And then when you come into your gaining phase, so when you've got to a point where you're happy with the level of body fat you have, and you're like, okay, now I want to gain, that is when we go full steam on, gaining muscle. And so it's important to have, single-minded phases of, lose weight or lose fat, gain muscle, lose some body fat, gain muscle, because then over time, you're sort of on this upward trajectory rather than just trying to do everything at once and just staying the same throughout. Some days you're like, oh, I want to gain. Some days I want to lose. And then you're just sort of simmering away at average. It's very rare, Janine. So usually for beginners who can do it. And I mean, yeah, Marvin, have you seen sort of any other cases?
I mean, there's also something to be said about staying at maintenance, right? But then now you have to be very meticulously tracking your calories and making sure you hit every gram to a T. Because when you're at maintenance, your body is never really at quote unquote maintenance. It's always either doing one or the other, but it happens over, let's say a week. So maybe in a week's time, maybe 3 days you were losing body fat, maybe the other 4 days you were gaining muscle. So it looks like you're maintaining. But this needs to be drawn out over months and months and months. And I'm talking like 6, 9, 12 months. Whereas you could do what Pete said, which is much better, where you're single focused, 3 months of I'm only losing body fat. This is my goal. And then after 3 months, you switch gears I'm going into a muscle gaining phase.
Amazing. So let's land the plane there and call it a night. I would love for you people on the call, women and men, to guys and girls, to basically, if you have any topics that you would like us to cover, please do just let us know in your group chats. We'd be really keen to obviously create resources that are super, ticking the boxes for what you need, what you want to know, what you want to understand. If not, we'll continue with what our plan is. So thank you everyone again. It's been amazing. Really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this on a Tuesday evening. And now go have dinner, go eat your protein, go to the gym, go to sleep, and we'll be in touch, no doubt. Masalama. To your cake. Yes, Janine. Have a great birthday.
Enjoy
I
the
think you're
cake.
allowed. 60 years old. I think you're allowed. Enjoy. Have a slice for me and Malvin as well.
Yes, please do.
One each. So that's three pieces at least. Okay. Bye bye everyone. Enjoy.